Thank you, everyone, for joining this meeting of the Legislative Review Committee. We're now in session. We have a quorum. We have an agenda. Approval of the agenda. Where is the agenda?
Right here.
Right here in front of me. Any changes to the agenda that members would like to make? All right, agenda's approved. Anybody have any changes for the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, without objection, unanimous consent, minutes accepted. All right, any public input? Seeing none, moving forward. Okay, we've got some information here. The first item on the noise ordinance, we had our police look into this noise camera that's being deployed in certain jurisdictions. And we've got some noise complaint data that is in front of us now. So yeah, I hand it over to Mr. Jones if we want to hear from the police about what we found out since our last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Edward. Yes, so we have Deputy Chief Daniel there and also John Spagna, Code Enforcement Administrator, and they can both speak to some of the issues that are on the agenda today. But I think I'll let Deputy Chief start off with the Knoxville, Tennessee noise camera.
Great. Deputy Chief.
Sure. So I guess kind of recap last discussion. They're not using this camera for enforcement purposes at this point. They're simply using it to monitor activity. The way it's designed, obviously, is to measure a certain decibel sound or level specifically related to muffler noise in their downtown district. And then it triggers a video camera. It records the vehicle that's traveling through that area. It's creating that noise and then it's documenting. And right now they're just using it to collect data. The particular company that they're using is a British company, this particular model. The camera, I think, is my understanding is it's on some kind of loan or lease program at this point. They haven't necessarily purchased it, but the camera itself runs about 25 to 30,000 per unit. And so there's not much more in addition to what we talked about last time to add, except that that's the per unit cost. It's a British company. They're currently they're not paying for it yet. They're just using it all loan.
Okay. Have you heard anything from the people? What have you heard from?
No, I've reached out to them. I haven't heard any response from them. But we can continue trying, of course.
I mean, hearing that information you just gave me, I'd be curious if we could get a loaner as well. That would be cool.
Yeah, I guess I don't have no problem with that, but I guess I'm not gonna make an issue of it, but I really would like to get some data from theirs or somebody else. If the loaner doesn't cost us no money, there's nothing that we gotta commit to, but I would like to they haven't collected data yet. It's nothing that we could go by. We just know they got this camera, right?
So they started their pilot in the spring. I don't have any data from them. I haven't seen them posted. And again, they haven't responded to my attempts to contact Knoxville Police Department specifically. And so I'm not aware of any data that they've published yet.
I would rather table this until we get something more concrete, even though it may not be as detailed. Jumping out here, I mean, to me, getting a camera. All right, let me support Chair. I would like the if that's the route you would like to go, maybe we could get details on an owner.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the area we probably need to find out. What does that mean? What are the ramifications of it? And then we can decide if we need a
Deputy Chief, can I ask you a quick question? What problem was Knoxville trying to solve when they actually put this pilot into place?
So what I've been able to read from public information or open source information is it sounds like it is a, specific to loud vehicles, revving engines with loud muffler systems in their downtown corridor, and how that reverberates off of, the buildings and the cityscape. And that's what this is directed toward.
Is that the problem we're having here too? I'm not downtown. Is that what we're having here? Well, I would support, the chair's, recommendation, but I guess the piece that I would say, what does that look like for a loaner camera?
Right. Yep.
We can certainly reach out to the company directly, at this point and ask them what it would take, in order to receive a loaner and, what those conditions look like.
Yeah. And then maybe Assistant Manager Jones can reach out to their management staff and just try a different channel, since Deputy Daniel hasn't had any luck with the police response.
I have a little different, I have a little different take on this. We've got surveillance cameras for crimes that are happening downtown, violent crimes. And they take a lot of time and effort to keep working and then working from that data. We even have dumping cameras that are out that we had to hire a part-time person because of the amount of time and effort and labor it takes to take down, process the information those cameras take to get it to address littering. And I guess I'm less supportive of an open community tracing, tracking pilot program that's scanning people's data based on their behavior. That is an annoyance. I get that. But I think it takes away from better spent time and effort and money on violent crime and what we could be doing to tackle that and that sort of thing. If there's some data that comes out of Knoxville that says noisy vehicles are directly related to some of the other issues that we're having, I would probably have a hard time with that. I'm not sure how I would process that, but I think I would be more prone to support this after there was somebody else's pilot in their community, because we've gotten a lot of pushback from traffic light cameras, license plate scanning, and different other things that people don't realize are happening that can turn into a tracing and tracking. So I'm less supportive of this, but I'm supportive of continuing to learn from Knoxville.
So, I'm sorry. So are you saying just getting the information about a loaner camera, no matter, it won't be helpful? Is that what you're saying? Because that's all that we're asking.
I guess I would be more inclined to continue to get data and information from them to know if it's worth our time and effort.
But I'm agreeing with you on that.
Okay.
But I'm saying, while we are waiting, are you saying that it would not be helpful just to get loaner information? I'm not voting on anything. I don't really, this is downtown. I really don't even care. Yeah. But I'm saying that would, to me, goes in line to what you're saying. You're saying, let's wait for some more data, which is fine. But while we're doing that, it would be crazy. It'd be difficult for us to get the data, and then we say, oh, let's call the whoever's and see what a loaner would. I think they both can move down the same path.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I just think it distracts with our staff shortages and stuff. I just think it distracts from things that we can have a stronger, more impactful issue in public safety.
Okay.
It's public safety people distracted from violent crime situations for noise violation. So I'm trying to weigh these things out.
Okay, I'm good.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah.
If I could ask, I know this conversation is kind of two-pronged. I know we're talking about noise related to cars, but we're also talking about a different kind of noise also with construction. So if I could ask that, if we do go down this Knoxville camera path, that we dedicate a couple of meetings specifically to this so staff can just focus on this one issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Dedicate a couple meetings?
Time and effort.
Yeah, I mean, you know, without a whole lot of passion about it one way or another, I tend to agree with what Commissioner White's sentiments are on the camera specifically. And I think those are also some of the concerns you were getting at, Commissioner Thornton.
I was just trying to work with the chair.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not tied to it.
I'm also just thinking about how discussions around noise-related things have been in this committee for almost a year. And I'm feeling like I'd like us to hone in on what we actually want to get done and figure that out in this meeting and maybe the next. I mean, after that, we're not even going to have the chair on the commission with us anymore. So I feel like, you know, trying to hone in on what of the things, we still have more presentations to go through, right? Of some of the data we've gotten, and we do have data around in our community. Maybe that can help inform where there might be clear action to take on something. But committing to even more meetings to kind of discuss this theoretical, should we use a camera that's going to collect data that we probably can't even do any enforcement around anyway, and takes more of our time and more of staff's time to use that camera, and to deliberate how to use it. And then, I mean, to be honest, thinking about the ways it could be used down the road, I feel pretty queasy about a lot of that too, so. Yeah.
May I ask a question? For the reason why I want to look into the camera, is that for potentially using it as an enforcement tool down the way if you were to adopt an ordinance that prohibited this kind of noise? Is that?
I mean, this is new technology and we are short-staffed on the police department. So it's not very effective to have a police cruiser out here measuring decibels and pulling people over, right? So the thought is exploring new technology to collect this information and then possibly in the future, based upon that information and issues with state law, et cetera, figuring out if there is a policy path forward for an enforcement mechanism. Due to the sort of propensity for loud trucks and souped up mufflers to create an unwelcoming sort of sociopathic zone in downtown where folks are revving engines up close to 100 decibels, you know, harming the hearing of our citizens, creating an unwelcoming environment at outdoor cafes. Any decibel above 85 does damage to your hearing. So
Certainly. And I'll just tell you, the reason I ask is just looking at if it is going to be used as an enforcement tool, whether or not we would actually have the authority to use it as an enforcement tool. For instance, like the red light or traffic control cameras, those are allowed by state law. There's nothing that we've found so far, and again, because it could be the technology is so new and state law is behind it, there's nothing in state law that would specifically allow for us to put one of these out there. The other concern is.
but it wouldn't preempt, right? I mean, that would be what we'd be most concerned with,
Potentially.
right?
And the other concern though too is if it's an enforcement tool, for instance, the traffic light cameras only provide a civil penalty. They can't provide a criminal penalty. And a lot of that's because under, you have the right to confront your accuser. Well, if your accuser is a camera, you can't really confront them.
Yeah.
With the red light traffic tickets, it's a strict liability. It doesn't take a picture of the actual driver of the vehicle. It basically gets the tag and then you serve the citation on the registered owner of the vehicle. So that would have to be, if we did go that way, it would be specifically a civil penalty only if we could do it. So that's why I asked if it was the enforcement piece.
Yeah.
Because like there is a specific state law that talks about traffic control devices and the use of those cameras for red light traffic control. There's just nothing that talks about sound. So it's possible that we are preempted. We would have to do more research, and that's why I wanted to know if that's ultimately a goal, we want to go ahead and start researching that so that, you all know we're not wasting anyone's time.
Right.
Or, if we do all this work and then find out at the end that we're not authorized to do so. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what the end goal was.
Well, the end goal for me is to measure the problem. You know, that's why I like the idea of this technology collecting information, because right now it's just anecdotal. You know, oh, I was downtown and this truck drove by at so-and-so hour and it hurt my ears. I mean, whatever, it's hard to craft policy based on anecdote, right? So the thought was to explore new technologies where tools are being developed that can measure a problem and see if it's something, you know, worth acting on. I mean, I don't even think we could, you know, I'd be curious to know, you know, does it have to collect license plate data? I mean, can we just measure and see, you know, this car came by at this time, this car came by at that time, you know, this many cars came by on a Friday night while children and other people are hanging around on Broad Street at 100 decibels.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I think if there was a camera that was collecting data of like how much this is happening without collecting data specific to people and their vehicles, that feels, yeah, if it's just like, there's been a, but I mean, at that point, does it need to be a camera, or can, you know, a decibel meter just be hooked up and you track how many times it's flipped over the amount?
So this is all really good conversation, and I appreciate some of the clarity around the problem. And I think this is a good example of why we need to just focus on this particular issue if we want to solve this particular problem. You know, I think staff can just focus on this one issue over the next couple of meetings, and then we could probably come to some sort of resolution.
I guess I still have a hard time imagining what we do with that data. I guess that's what I'm, do you have any thoughts, Chair, on like, let's say we get data that reveals that this is actually a big problem.
And we can prove it. That's important.
And then what do we do with that information?
Well, I think it goes back to, can we do anything with it? I think that still remains to be seen. Can we even do anything with it? I think that was your point. There has to be some delving into. So I am so good just keeping it moving. And now the attorney's office knows that we're looking at it, but we may not be able to do anything with it.
Again, I would rather we just pass on tracking this. My priority has been in that same line of unwelcoming environment is the amplified heckling that happens downtown, which is person-specific, hostile, unwelcoming. I've heard more about that and other sort of targeted, hostile, unwelcoming environment that I have from a passing car that comes and goes versus this constant battering. And I know that's that's a different spin-off addressing, you can't monitor and you can't do anything about what somebody says, but you don't have to let them have a bullhorn. And, you know, unless they have a special event permit or something like that. But anyway, I would rather we spend 2 meetings on that than delay by this topic addressing that and some of these other things. But I could be the minority, or it could be split, I don't know.
I mean, I hear you about the heckling, absolutely. I think the key distinction there, though, is that this is, you know, these are, I mean, it's just a thornier issue because these are, you know, this is people's speech. They're out there talking, you know, and I know it would trigger First Amendment concerns that we're up against. I mean, certainly we can regulate time, place, and manner, you know, within strict scrutiny. I mean, that's certainly a thornier path.
It's just the equipment. Talking about, I mean, we're talking about somebody's car equipment, which we also can't monitor. I don't even know, officer, can we pull somebody over? Can a person pull somebody over for having a loud car?
So that's
If,
what I was going to talk about a minute ago.
Okay.
Is based on our ordinance and state law, the amplified sound is about radios, speaker systems, and not muffler system. So our laws don't even apply to that directly. The laws related to the exhaust systems on the state has more to do with the production of visible exhaust that would obscure the view of other people driving on the roadway.
And the selling of that equipment that allows you to do it, but we've got these do it your own. I think what you're talking about are people's do it themselves modifications, that aren't trackable. So the state's kind of already done all it can with the equipment management, manufacturing. And then it's trickling down to another issue. And, again, it's the equipment. And then again, hopefully we can address, like you're saying, you can pull over too loud, amplified,
For music, radios,
Yeah.
things like that. Yes.
or, and who knows if it's a person, I mean, can you pull somebody over who's speaking through the front of their car's amplified speaker? Can you?
Potentially, yes.
Not because of what they're saying, but the volume at which they're saying
That's
it.
right.
Okay.
Not the content of the speech, not the volume.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't see any harm in us exploring whether or not this tool could be accessed by us, you know, on loan or free of charge, just to see what kind of data we could collect. I mean, just a minute.
Just that information, and then we can see if it can be set up by itself, unmonitored, and only documenting the sound. Commissioner Huel, am I hearing that would suit you, or if it was not tracking? Because to me, tracking the personal data is.
More, like if there's some way to just have a thing there that's automatically collecting data around how often a nuisance is being produced without taking up staff time to try to monitor it, and without creating a circumstance where individuals can be tracked essentially
Yeah.
because a camera
And the other thing,
pictured them or their vehicle.
I guess, and then if we have this tool, then I guess we could look at what next, you know, if there is something to do, if there's an ordinance to come up with. Again, this is not my top issue,
Yeah, me neither.
but, if there's no extra work from nobody to, other than to find out from the company, you know, what the cost of a loaner would be. I don't want you to stop catching criminals to find out what the loaners would be, but I don't have no big, pushback on it.
I guess the other thing I'll share on this is like I feel a bit of responsibility that this is still in front of our committee, because it was months ago that I brought up rolling coal, and that was about the smoke issue, and this isn't even really about that, but this is related that people modify their cars to be loud on purpose, or emit black smoke on purpose. And
So this is not what you meant.
Yeah, we're so far from what I had initially kind of brought up, and then what we've learned from the attorney's office about how difficult.
This isn't just because of what you brought up, though, Commissioner. I mean, I know that some constituents of my district that live on Deering Street hear folks cruising on Broad, late at night, and it wakes them up, and they've been reaching out to the mayor and to me, so it's not just rolling coal, it's really about the noise.
No, anecdotally, I'm not saying that the noise isn't also a thing I and plenty of other people experience as annoying. The fact that this committee is kind of still here talking about it, maybe my memory is flawed, but just kind of thinking about how we got here from, at the start of the years, we were talking more about noisy lawn equipment and polluting lawn equipment. And it's kind of wound now into a discussion of just what, if anything, can we do about noise and all the many ways noise happens in our community. And I guess, generally speaking, my desire in this meeting is how can we hone, can we funnel our conversation back to whatever specific thing or things really need to be addressed and feasibly can be in this meeting or the next one.
Okay, well,
As well as what we can do about it.
yeah, so, okay, can we move forward and just have Deputy Chief Daniel contact the company and work further with trying to get information from Knoxville? I mean, is that okay?
It's okay with me.
Do I hear a motion? Somebody make a motion. We'll just move forward.
Do
Okay,
what you just suggested.
all right. Is there a second? So,
Sorry.
Mr. Myers, there's a motion on the floor to allow Deputy Chief Daniel to reach out to this noise camera company in the UK and see if they'll loan us a machine for free.
Not loan us, to find out what the criteria would be to get.
If it's possible to get
Yeah,
loaned
just
one.
the details, and then we would have to say, oh, we want to do this or not. That was what I thought you were.
Okay, so to find out if it's possible to get a loaner tool, and then also to try to get Knoxville to respond to our inquiries regarding their pilot. That's the motion on the floor. Do I hear a second? Okay.
You know, I guess I'm so comfortable with this motion because it's not anything we're going to do without another meeting, to decide what we're going to do. We put a lot of stuff out there. You know, I wish we had this type of, discussion when we start laying bike traps and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean traps, I didn't mean to call it a trap. I mean bike, paths and stuff. We put down bike paths based on a report. And here we're only asking to have extra information. That's crazy to me. And we spent money. We're spending money. So
Okay.
I'm only asking for, well, I was on your side on that one. I think it died for a second, lack of a second. I'm good.
All right, so no more looking into, noisy vehicles, whatever.
Okay.
So, do you have anything, Mr. Spagna, about this information here in front of us?
It would go back to the construction and landscape stuff.
Yeah. So at the last meeting, we talked about, does anybody have anything they want to say about construction and landscaping?
Well, we do have this whole handout that's just been, I mean, I'm just looking at it. That actually talks about house and vehicle noise complaint.
Yeah.
We didn't even get to that
So did we skip that? The noise complaint
data.
data?
Not too late to end up with a motion after we get through the rest of the materials.
That's right. We may have got the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Back to the data.
Okay,
It's a, I mean, I haven't read this. I've just been looking at the agenda and I moved it and here we have.
Deputy Daniel, do you have any input you'd like to share with us about this chart on noise complaint data?
Also, most part is self-explanatory, I think. You've got the top page, first page is just a summary of annual, calls for service based on noise complaints, and it's broken down by whether it was generated from a house or residence or it's generated from a vehicle specifically. And then the next pages are dispositions, and what that is, essentially generally what occurred, once we received the call, and you can see that breakdown from there. The thing to note here is when you're looking at this, what you will see is the number of dispositions is larger than the total number of calls for service. The reason is there are certain times when more than one officer may be dispatched and they may clear themselves separately on two different dispositions or more than one disposition. And so this, for example, two dispositions could be applied to the same call. So one officer may say they're issuing a citation and the other officer may say, I'm turning this incident over to the officer who issued the citation. So you have two dispositions, so you'll see a larger number there. And that's just to clarify that.
That's what 09 is turned over to?
Status 9, yes.
Okay.
That's correct. And then this is really more just the data breakdown of the presentation from last time. It summarized a couple of broad points, which is what times of day are we receiving complaints? What days of the week are we most often receiving complaints? So if you recall, believe it or not, looking at the pie charts again, majority of complaints come through our noise complaints come through weekends, and then a little bit more than half are happening during the hours of the day that the 300-foot flies or before late night hours, 11 or 12 o'clock, depending on what day it is. you have any questions on the data specifically?
I want to hear, and I want to hear it from you. I'm looking at this, but I really do want to hear about the Commerce Road report. I want you to just break it down to me, so I really will understand this. I'm understanding.
Okay.
I done jumped up all over you because I'm here for Commerce.
Well,
I'm
let's,
sorry.
let's look at the chart real quick. I mean, I think it's, I mean, over 1,000 noise complaints from vehicles so far this year.
I'm sorry,
Is that right?
That's the 7-year total.
that's a multi-year total, that you're looking at. It's 1,800, across 2015 to year-to-date 2022. Year-to-date 2022, it's 135.
Okay.
Noise complaints. Now, that's year-to-date when this report was ran, which was, August 22nd.
Oh, so the 1,000 number, that's including the house. Gotcha.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the days of the week, you know, in terms of the night noise, it's Friday is really, I mean, the Sunday noise complaints are really late Saturday night, right? I mean, that's why we're having some of them more, so that's the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are really Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights in terms of we're thinking about activity. I mean, just for me to think about.
General,
Right.
that's probably accurate. We'd have to look at that in a little more detail.
Yeah, but I would assume that.
Right, for Sunday to have more than 2,600, a lot of those are probably occurring on Saturday night.
Right, between, you know, 12 and 2.
One of the things that, I noticed is that even from the first page, it does seem like the complaints are going down. Am I reading this right? From the noise house complaint
Yeah.
in 2015 was 1,800 plus. 2022 is 9. Am I reading this right?
We're not
That's
finished
year to
with
date. We haven't completed the year.
Okay.
We could pull back up, the last meeting, we provided a line graph essentially
Oh,
to
okay.
kind of show that trend.
Okay.
It's relatively stable if we look at it over.
Okay.
Kind of logic.
Okay. I got you.
Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
Just tell me about this noise complaint vehicle, back to that, what we're, focusing on here, we're trying to. Is that a moving, I mean, you hear a complaint, how's it tracked, and then do you end up at a house? I mean, tell me how this works. Is it a mobile, situation where it's gone on arrival or unfounded or assignment complete? I'm trying to figure out how you're finding them when somebody's complaining about them.
How you're finding a
The
vehicle
yeah.
specifically?
Yeah,
Well, generally the way that would play out is we get either a very specific or general area where somebody hears the noise coming from, an officer would go to that area and, listen and look or observe for somebody who's engaging in the behavior that was reported. Sometimes we have a vehicle description, sometimes we don't.
okay.
And that can, certainly change whether or not we can locate somebody. But you'd have to really look at each individual case as to what information was provided, what the officer knew at the time, and then based on that, what actions they took.
Right, which is why unfounded is kind of the largest category, or it was in years past.
It's one of the larger
Yeah.
position types, correct?
So then these are actual complaints, not that you actually stop somebody, such. It could be in there, but these are really complaints.
So this does not distinguish a call from a person in the community versus an officer who just happens upon something
Okay,
and hears it themselves and then initiates the contact without a complaint.
okay.
So that's public or ACCPD
That's-
complaint.
And this is number of complaints, not number of incidents, right? So if there's 5 complaints about the same house party, that would show up as 5, not 1.
So I'll have to double check that with the crime analysis folks and how they tabulated this, whether they factored that in or not. I think that's something. certainly follow up on.
And then, yeah, this is also gonna be people complaining based on what they think they can file a complaint about, right? So the vehicle noise is probably more related to amplified noise than it is muffler noise.
I
or can
can't
that
speak to
be-
that, I don't know.
So this, I guess that's the thing to clarify for us, is if this data includes calls about things that aren't even actually regulated under ordinance right now. Like if someone's like, it sounds like people are racing down my street, or it sounds like there's loud muffled. So would it call that in, show up on here even though there's no ordinance, or is it?
So to call, if somebody said someone's racing down my street, it wouldn't be dispatched as a noise violation. It'd be dispatched as some other type of traffic complaint, racing, something to that effect. If they call and say, hey, there's, if they say it's a noise complaint, this is too loud. If they said it's from a muffler specifically, or if it's from a speaker system, then either way, that should generate, a complaint or a call for service under this category type.
Cool. Thanks for putting this together.
Absolutely.
Okay, another area of inquiry, from the last meeting, we
No,
were,
no. Oh,
uh,
I'm trying to get here.
oh, you wanted to look at the.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
go ahead.
Yeah.
My concern, of course, is the Commerce Road area. That was what I brought up. And it is the last page, that I can see, unless there's something else up here. But you have it in red, so I'm just wanting to see. And I also, God, there's a couple of my areas on here, and didn't even notice, but, I really want to talk about this, and I'm glad the attorney's here. Could you, I'll ask my question if you would, I'll let you speak first, and then I'll ask my question.
Absolutely, thank you. So the packet that you have answers a couple of different questions. The first couple pages, I think the Commissioner Hoole's questions from last time is about location data and heat mapping. This is an example of where we've heat mapped our noise complaints, so you can kind of get generally an idea of where the hotspots are across the county. It shouldn't be of much surprise that our most densely populated area right in the core of downtown generates basically a larger hotspot. And then you can see a kind of zoomed in version of that on the second page. What that looks like. And then, of course, the key is telling you generally about how many complaints per square mile are occurring based on the color. The next couple pages here are, if we the bar graph that highlights the most repeated addresses where we're receiving noise complaints, and kind of shows you specific locations. And of course, some of these are apartment complexes, and so it may not be the same individual. You could have a 200 or 300 unit apartment complex. Naturally, we're going to generate a larger number of noise complaints there than a single family residence, because there's more people living in that area. And then the last page, Commissioner Thornton's question is, the last point is, I don't think you'll have it tonight, specifically on address that she's referring to, what the complaints are there.
I don't have the.
And this, right, we don't have that page. And on the hotspot maps, just want to note this, is that the first one is complaints over a 7-year period, where the second one is just year to date this year,
That's correct.
which is noted on the year to date is very similar to the 7-year map, right?
Right.
So things haven't changed.
And so my question is, and I've heard different responses, so I have the attorney, while we have the attorney here. When you have one entity that is having multiple complaints, and in this case, it's the rodeo club. when they have their entertainment. And they get the citation, they pay it, they get the citation, they pay it, and nothing changes. Is there anything on the books that residents or we can do when you get so many citations? Because they're making money, so they don't mind paying for that, because that's a drop in the bucket because they're making so much more money. Is there anything that can be done? Someone told me that the residents could file a noise nuisance order and that it could go to court.
There's a possibility potentially for a nuisance abatement. I would want to talk to Austin Jackson in our office who handles nuisance abatements. But as far as, if they're issued a citation, unless there's something on the citation that references court only, they can continue to just go to municipal court and pay that citation. I think in other instances, Deputy Dean, I can't remember if it wasn't noise complaints, but it was something similar where we requested that if an officer knows that this is happening repeatedly with the same individual being cited, to write court only on the citation. And then it would be up to the municipal court judge to determine what the penalty would be. I would have to look specifically at our ordinance again to see what the maximum amount is for each citation, and if there's anything in our ordinance that talks about, after a third citation, you get, this much. But a lot of that is going to be the discretion of Judge Engel as the municipal court judge. So if the owner comes to court, if the citation says court only, they appear in municipal court and they want to, plead guilty, which is not the right terms, but accept responsibility, then the judge would say, go pay the clerk, whatever. So there's not, and he's going to find them within the bounds of what the ordinance says. So there's not really, unless the ordinance is changed to mandate, after the fifth citation, you have to pay $2,000, you have to this, but they're kind of component. And again, the judge hopefully would have a lot of discretion in the punishment, if you will, the amount of the citation that will be paid. But there's really nothing that prohibits someone who gets a citation from just going and paying the fee for that citation.
But that's where we are right now. And that's to me, that's the problem. And I guess as we move forward, I would like us to examine this ordinance and even have Judge Hope sit in here with us to talk about it, because this is what is happening. They pay the citation and they keep partying. So I would like if you would, or someone would, look at the ordinance, what it is. At some point, let's all make some decisions on, this might be an ordinance that we need to address.
But I thought we addressed that with our rowdy houses. How did we, could somebody refresh my
Well,
memory?
Deputy Chief, are y'all able to put court only on these citations to Club Venom?
So we can, and generally the way that works is, the least point is, it would be dependent on, I guess, what that officer knew or experienced or observed at the time. So if they know, we've been out here 15 other times and this isn't working, so based on the volume of calls and the volume of offenses, or the severity or particular egregious nature of whatever's in front of them, they can write court only and force that person to go see the judge. So that's certainly a discretionary matter and something that we can certainly look into doing.
Well, I mean, seeing 17 complaints so far this year, I would support as a political matter, the ratcheting up of enforcement measures there to compel them to come to court to see the judge. And if they come see the judge a few times, the judge will remember that they keep coming back and the fine should rise, commensurate with that. I mean,
Don't we have a limit of how?
it's $1,000.
Right.
So $1,000 or 6 months in jail.
Looking at
Is that it?
the penalty right now, it's under section 1-1-5 in our code. And generally, the penalty and continuing violations, whenever in this code or any ordinance of Athens-Clarke County, act is prohibited or made or declared unlawful. The violation of that provision of the ordinance shall be punishment with fine not to exceed $1,000 for imprisonment for a term not to exceed 6 months or any combination thereof, subject to all limitations contained here. Each day, any violation of this code or any other ordinance shall continue constitutes a separate offense.
So that gives the judge the discretion.
And separate offense per day. I would like for us to continue to delve down this sort of example and maybe come up with an ordinance that can help or learn if we can have a tipping point. I think 5's a bit much on here. Maybe we could help define what number of calls. How much of this is also under code enforcement? Aren't you on some of the noisy house complaints?
Not a whole lot, no,
No?
because they happen at nighttime and on the weekends. It's more of a police model.
Okay. All right, so this is the chart we're going with here. Would it be helpful for the committee if we saw the year before? Well, that's kind of pandemic, but I think this is giving us data that is concrete enough to strengthen
Right.
going to these higher penalties.
Do we know, what these are, like, say, the Commerce Road one, right, where we have 12. On this chart, it says noise complaints, so we don't know what evolved. Is that on another chart? I mean, how many of these ended up with, a fine or violation?
I can provide.
Because that would,
Have that full to provide to you.
That may be a municipal or
Right.
clerk record. If you're talking about like, once the citation was issued, I think the police department's pretty much out of it, then it would go to municipal court. And I can ask Austin or municipal court clerk to say, you know, of these citations that were issued, you know, can you tell me how they were
resolved,
resolved? Because they may, they could get dismissed at municipal court, they could
Right.
get paid right away. I'm not sure how good their record keeping system is, so I'm not sure if, like, for instance, if someone were to go, you know, Club Venom, or is it Rodeo now? I don't know. It's been so many different names.
Yeah.
That when they go to pay the citation, I'm not sure the clerk's office system, when they, you know, pull up, okay, you're paying citation number 123. Oh, you're Rodeo. Well, I see that you've paid 20 citations this year. I don't know that their system does that, so that would be something that.
That would be good to know, because, I mean, the question of if this is just a part of business, well, actually, if they aren't paying the $1,000 or the $500, then we don't know that. So we don't know how much this is costing them. We just know there have been complaints that we need more information on.
I would like to see that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
Couple things. One is just, I think we should be careful to define it by incidents and not by calls. Because, you know, if this data is showing us calls, and that might be a bunch of calls about the same incident, I don't see like a need to escalate this because 5 people complained at once, right? So this is more like if there's a repeat offense of instances, right? And yeah, I guess to me, if there's this discretion that the judge can use that is maybe not getting used because people are just paying fines, in my mind, this sounds maybe less like a ordinance change that maps out like a standardized amount you definitely get each time, and more like a policy change of once it becomes a repeat offense, then the PD switches to court only in the citation to kind of force that conversation to happen a different way. And the other thing, I'm forgetting exactly how we covered this last meeting, but thought I remembered us talking about who gets cited, Deputy Daniel, and when you were saying that it's usually whoever's present. So you can end up in a situation where different people are cited at the same address repeatedly. It's like a fraternity house or something. Or I guess maybe with a business, it's like the same with like whoever's managing that night instead of whoever owns the business.
So a business would be a little bit different because it's easier to establish ownership or who's responsible. A fraternity, for example, you don't know what you're gonna get when you get there, and different people can step out and claim responsibility, and it's a little more difficult to determine who's due. But a business, either the owner or manager is gonna be present, and so it's a little bit easier.
I think the other thing I'd be interested in looking into is if there's a way for us to say that citations are going to go to both. There's at least a notification provided to, or perhaps a citation issued to both the person present and the property owner. Because that might be a way to curb some of this issue in places that are rentals with different people all the time, or fraternities and sororities and things like that, as well as perhaps maybe that would make a difference in businesses, or maybe not, depending on how y'all are already doing. Those are kind of the two things that stick out to me, and those, I don't know if either of those are ordinances as much as policy. I don't know if you can clarify that. Attorney Pappas.
I'm sorry, I was reading the ordinance. Can you ask your question again about?
If we wanted to establish that after X amount of incidents, more than one or more than two or whatever, that it goes to court only
On an address.
on an address, yeah, would that be, that's a policy, not an ordinance change, right?
Yeah, I think that would be more a policy, and I think that would depend again on how, like, what municipal court's data system is for how they track. Are they tracking, citations by address or by owner or by, I'm not sure what their database management system does. And I'll, when I get back to the office, I'll talk to Austin, who handles all of our municipal court violations, and see if he knows.
But this would also be for the PD, right? To say like if an officer answers a call that they know because their system pops up. Or I guess you're saying that wouldn't show up in their system as a repeat unless the court is tracking it as the.
Right, and
Well, we can certainly, officers can request a quick query from our dispatchers about how many times we've been out to this address for this type of event, and perhaps what the dispositions are. Depending on how quickly they need that information, it may or may not be readily available, because it does take our crime analysis a little bit of time to pull this and sift through it. Dispatchers have a lot going on at night, but certainly I think that's a policy decision we can look into, is at what point after 2 or 3 citations do we start issuing court-only offenders.
And then, just to clarify with Attorney Pappas here, and then the other thing I was trying to raise up about who gets cited, would that also be a policy decision, or would that be something where the ordinance would have to change? So if we wanted to say a citation would be issued to whoever's on site and also the property owner, is that also something that's just within the discretion of the department to decide to do?
yeah, I don't think the ordinance itself speaks to who is cited. I'd have to look back specifically again. I don't know, like if it's at a house, if you cite if you look on Public and see who the owner is, it's probably not, because it could be rented. So I'm not sure the answer to that question, but I'll figure that out.
And then I guess just, well, we've got code enforcement here too, and I remember you gave us data at, I think, the last meeting or the meeting prior, and it was, far fewer incidents overall. Right. But if you had a repeat offender of a construction site or a construction company, then it was similarly would apply there, so.
We mostly will do court only. But if you're dealing with a tenant or an assistant manager, like at a bar, and we ticket them, and then there's a repeat incident. Well, let me got ahead of myself. Before there's a repeat incident, we will copy the corporation or the registered agent with the citation to their tenant or to the property. If it's these kids or somebody living in a house and they keep putting their garbage cans out and won't take it back in. We might give a citation to the tenant, but the property owner's going to find out about it. And we're basically going to have a conversation with the property owner that they will be next with the citation if they can't correct it.
And that's a policy that your department has?
That's policy that we have.
The laws written.
No, it has nothing to do with the law. What we're trying to do is correct the behavior as quick as possible. So the registered agent would get the citation if we had to go that far with a corporation because they haven't corrected it. But they'd know before they got the citation. And what we'll do is we'll try to do service through a police department or a city code enforcement this person appears to be in Gainesville. We would have Gainesville PD, and they sometimes cost $50 to get them cited. It carries more weight coming from the local sheriff's department, the police department, that it can be brought to their attention at their home. And so we will do that. But we do try to get it corrected at the, well, I say assistant manager, that seems to what we run into downtown a lot, assistant managers. But most are pretty good over, if they know that they're gonna be, the owner's gonna be notified or something like that. And it's in obviously their best interest to correct this. I'm not aware of this location, I apologize for that, but yeah, I mean, that's how I would handle it.
So can may I make a motion? Or I guess,
I have a question.
I have a motion whenever everybody's on the.
I got a question.
Go ahead. I wanted to talk before the motion too. Go ahead.
Oh, you want to talk about food motion? I noticed that, 135 Bonnie Lane, 100 Roanoke Ridge, it's another one. I know those are Section 8 and public housing addresses. So when these folk are cited, are the Section 8 or public housing folk notified that there's some noise going on here? Especially the Bonnie Lane one, that was like 6. But is public, I guess I'm trying to find out, in the subsidized housing, when you cite that resident, does the public housing or Section 8 owners, are they notified that they got a problem?
So that would really depend on like the circumstances as to, is this a repeat house or a repeat location or not? Certainly a single noise violation. We're not in the practice of trying to bring in the housing authority to bring extra scrutiny, attention, or harm on the individuals if it's just a single noise complaint. But if it's a persistent problem, then we do work with housing in order to address the issues from there and see what they're able to do to help us with that. Yes.
Okay. Okay, the question that I had in relation to the two different charts, officer, was that when we've got all these different options of your coding of the events, did the ones that make it to the red chart, is it because of we don't know what the results were. I think this is piggybacking a little bit.
That's what I was wanting to know.
We don't know how the results were, even though they were multiple complaints. We don't know what the results were. And I guess without having to make y'all find data that might not be aligned yet, I think that, and I hope the motion that's percolating addresses that. I want to keep going with this so that we can start having stronger enforcement for repeat events. I don't want to go through all these addresses because there's several of them that I believe are in my district, and I'm coming back with some feedback on that. Or, I don't want to. I want to keep talking about this and go a little bit further on what we can do, because I'm hearing a little difference in sometimes the repeat is obvious to the officers, or the severity is, and then sometimes it's not. And it could be the amount of time in a year between the complaints. But I also want to refresh myself on our noise ordinance, which I thought did include the property owner, especially on the repeats. So that's how I feel about processing this data. And I'm interested in the motion.
I would just want to make one observation before that, because it hasn't been brought up. One in these highly repeated ones, I just am noting, I can only identify 2 from my looking on Google and such that are fraternity houses, which is interesting. And the other thing is, if I look at some of the information that's over in the right-hand grayed out column, we're noticing that the top one, Nellie B, high violence area, Broad Street, the apartment 2360, that's drug that's noticed as high drug activity. The
Mm.
next one is your club, Old Hull Road, which is over, I saw where that was, but it doesn't have a name. But then the next one on Bailey Street has gang-related activity. So it seems like a lot of these addresses with repeated noise problems get more serious stuff going on. And I don't know how that, I don't know from the perspective of the police department, for example, I could see you all be going like, oh, you're like focusing on the noise here. There's a lot more serious things to focus on. And I wondered if you have any comments on how those are related. I mean,
I don't know what the nexus would be, if any, between violent crime or more serious crimes that occur to these addresses and noise complaints.
Okay.
I just don't have that in front of me. On another note, if I can add real fast, to Commissioner Poop's question, I was just asking on the side, each in the data, each one of these calls for service is a unique event. So that's not 2 or 3 or 4 calls per event. When that does happen, they are in the process of combining those into a single event. So for example, if 3 people call about the same address at the same time saying they're making noise, that generates 1 call for service based on this date.
And that's this chart.
That's correct.
And so then
which would be true.
that means that this chart is also one
That's
incident.
This chart is informed by the data.
That goes there.
And I think that was with the, you said too, the one date incident replicating.
So that's even more compelling than
Yeah.
we have nearly 20 unique events.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're waiting on, Commissioner Hood's, motion. But I would just like some clarity on, and I don't even know what his motion is gonna be. What can we expect as far as information, what you're hearing from us about what we're asking? What can we expect from us? Asking the right questions for you to go look back into.
Yes, I think you're absolutely asking the right questions. I think the information that my office would be able to provide is reaching out to municipal court to kind of ask about what their case database management system does, what kind of information they capture, what Mr. Jackson, when he is going into court, is he aware of repeat violators, that kind of information. So, again, I don't track those cases. I know Austin deals with all of those. I don't know they cover if he's ever gone, so I just don't personally know, but they'll have that information and, I can provide whatever I know if I need it the next meeting, or if I have enough information beforehand, I'll type it up in a memo that you want.
Okay.
Great. All right, do I hear a motion?
So my motion is, this is bearing in mind what we heard from our code enforcement staff about their approach, because that sounds to me like maybe the direction we kind of want to head. So a motion to request that staff bring back to next meeting a draft of departmental policies for ACCPD and code enforcement, which address repeat incidents at residential and commercial properties, and which include provisions around both who is cited as well as how they are cited. Does that cover?
I'll second that.
So that, you said code enforcement.
And ACCPD.
Okay.
So that way we can
And the
compare.
attorney's office.
What's
Well, I'm assuming the attorney's office is going to be heavily involved in.
I want to all
on
spell
departmental
that.
policy.
As well as, and we'll include information from municipal court.
Yeah.
on
Can you
the
state the motion again, please?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my motion is to try to get us a draft of a policy to discuss at the next meeting. I'm sure it'll be informed by the things that'll happen at the, do you get that understanding, Attorney Pappas?
So you're asking for policies that are currently in existence, or for us to draft a policy that cover the concerns that you all have addressed today?
I guess both. The impression I get is that code enforcement either has a policy, code enforcement has some kind of policy, whether it's written or not, where you all could probably just describe in writing if it's not already in writing what you do. And then ideally, ACCPD brings us some kind of comparable policy modeled after the approach you all use and informed by the information you collect as attorney, to achieve better outcomes around
About the review.
I don't know if there are already existing policies around this that just need to be updated or
Mhm.
that everyone needs to be aware exist and then used, or if it's to create a new one. But either way, I think we've all talked about this enough to know what we want to see addressed, right? So the motion is to request that staff bring back to the next meeting draft of departmental policies for ACCPD and code enforcement, which address repeat incidents at residential and commercial properties, and which includes provisions around both who is cited as well as how they are cited.
Or noise ordinances,
Oh, for noise. Yeah.
which is.
Departmental policies for ACCPD and code enforcement with regards to noise complaints.
I'll second that, question in a second.
Thank you.
Okay.
But you know the question.
Is it-
Question.
Is anyone against the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passed. Okay. All right.
I try.
So, the final thing we have here is the construction noise. And I'd like to wrap this up quickly. Mr. Stagna, did you have any information for us regarding the construction noise, landscape noise, the times? And
Well, I believe the last time, Director Hansford was going to be back with you about just how many construction noise violations, and although they don't track those specifically, he came back with, there was approximately 3 in a past year where there was a noise complaint that came in. And of those, I believe 2 of them were already approved by him to start at an earlier time. 1 was not. And so what they do is, because most of these locations are permitted, they'll send a building inspector out to see what's going on, to make sure that, if the building inspector was to find this as an unpermitted thing, they'll call us and we can do a stop work order and take enforcement action. But if it's usually, like the William over here that's terribly behind and something like that. And so they'll usually come into compliance because it's 6 a.m. that you're dealing with construction noise, which is quite early, especially now. It doesn't get light till 7:30, but either way, it's still 7:30. So it was a very minor number with the construction. And then the only thing that I did not see in the previous notice that was not discussed is there is a noise ordinance in solid waste that we deal with for collection times, 7 a.m. And we got about 12 in the last 2 years concerning too early of a collection.
Private haulers, obviously,
It's haulers, yes.
and not, residential or commercial or both. You think?
It's both.
Both, okay.
It's both. And in some cases, they're pretty reasonable. Most of the haulers are. We've only had maybe 1 repeat, and I think that was a couple of years ago. It was a Coney Waste Transport, and they were cited at that point, second time.
And I take it these are all in the too early range, not the too late.
That's correct. Almost, I think almost.
Yeah. I guess some people weren't even getting picked up. You remember that phase?
Yeah, well, that's, yeah.
Different thing.
And that is a different thing. And the only thing I would say is, I know you were talking about trying to make them hours maybe similar. Just keep in mind, landscape and issues and construction issues are in one ordinance, which is the noise ordinance. And then that solid waste is in the solid waste ordinance. So you might want to have a discussion with Suki, the director of solid waste, just if that was going to be anything, since that time is different as well.
Right.
But the solid waste ordinance is supposed to be effective.
Yes, ma'am.
That's great.
It is. Just have to bring it to our attention. I
Yeah.
mean, we don't know about it
Yeah.
unless it's brought to our
Yeah.
attention.
Complaint driven.
Yes.
All right. Well, so we're gonna get some info. Do I hear any motions about construction hours or anything?
I would like to make a motion that we have in front of us for the next meeting, solid waste description so that we can see their times or condensed version in comparison for the noise ordinance that
You mean the ordinance itself, is that what?
Yeah, what's currently there so we can look at those different times, because I think that's where some of our confusion is with different times.
That's 5-2-30 in the ordinance, is the solid waste.
What is it again?
5-2-30.
I thought you were giving me the time.
Oh,
I was like, what?
I-
But
Just-
then,
We can pull that up while we're here, right?
Yes, sir.
5, 2.
for those who have internet at their disposal, some of us know. I get blocked out of this building. I do too.
Hopefully, put it in the right section.
Two.
The races are on between.
Hours of
Not
collection.
George.
No person or entity shall engage in the residential collection of any solid waste or recyclable materials from dumpsters, containers, or receptacles of any kind or type except during the hours of 7 a.m. until 9 p.m. unless performing emergency work, yada, yada. And
And then what did you guys say, the construction?
Construction is 6 a.m.
commercial collection of any solid waste or dumpsters from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
For what?
And that's for the central business district.
Oh, you don't. Let's,
Where's the part about, I want to look at this.
Let's talk about,
Construction.
so construction's is in the noise ordinance.
Oh, it's not.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And it's section 7 or paragraph 7.
6 a.m. to,
6 a.m. until,
again, it's the morning's the one.
It's in our minutes.
11 p.m. Yeah, for construction.
I don't think there's gonna be any appetite from all that we've learned, to change that one to 7 or change the solid waste to 6, so I scratched what started off.
Well,
with
the 6 will get you, yeah, the solid waste, I mean,
Yeah.
the collectors will like it, but the citizens won't.
Right.
Yeah,
And the trash is a regular thing where the construction is
That's true.
project specific.
that was a good lesson that we learned on that one earlier.
Yeah, those are all the hours.
There we go.
Oh, wow, that was good getting it together.
And
See,
I think I emailed it to y'all from the last meeting, but probably.
yes, you're in there, but yeah. I think too, what I hope next time when we talk, I'll bring examples of what we have in the way of littering code enforcement stuff. It could be that we want to put together something that's a little more, shareable on some of these and sort of, I'm not sure, maybe a little more consistency of when it's allowed versus the when it's prohibited, because sometimes it jumps around.
Jumped, right.
Which it is.
And then it gets confusing.
But I'll bring examples of the litter thing that we have, because it could give it,
Just in terms of education, communication.
So is the goal here that you're wanting to see more consistency? Like, are you wanting to see a change in hours, or are you wanting to see just better
I know.
materials for the public?
B in your multiple choice answer there, because I've learned enough from here, I can speak to why they're different much better than I did when we started, which my hypothesis was I was going to see if we could make them more similar, but I have learned a great deal with this on why it is how it is, and, but I'll bring those samples. I'll just have that as my little side note to show and to see if that's something we can piggyback. But this is great, Chair.
Assistant Manager Jones, are you still there at your conference?
He was presenting, he might have had to go.
I guess I'm wondering, I mean, is there a way that we can, like, just here today, make a motion to direct staff to create, we have professionals who can design things to create like a more publicly accessible.
Let me bring the example I've got so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. And then I can review it too. It might just be an extra page for that one.
Yeah, I guess that, my hope is that we can
Move on to something.
move on to being done as soon as possible.
We will be. I won't drag it out.
All right.
We have heckling on the right away to.
I'm sorry, I think I missed the question to me. My apologies.
There he is.
All right.
We're good, we're
I
good.
promise.
Yeah, we're about to adjourn. It's all good.
Mr. Chair, did you want us to consider something regarding vehicular noise? We kind of started with a very specific thing around the camera, but before everything related to vehicular noise just disappears into the ether, is there something that you would do?
Okay, no.
We didn't get a second or
Yeah,
thing.
I don't know where to go on
For the
that.
camera.
The data didn't change my opinion.
So,
So it's dead in the water.
all right, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we want to set the next meeting? Or you-